Happy Thursday afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. My name is Nejad, and I'm joined by Meg Shoup and Mike McClure. As you can see, me and Mike are on the road, but we've got 10 games to talk about. Meg, we've got bye weeks now. So we've got 6 1 o'clock games, 4 o'clock games. So we have less games to break down. It feels weird to have bye weeks. I got to be honest with you. How you feeling going into this week? I can tell you before you even get started, my worst week by far was last week. I was very invested in a particular game that didn't go correctly. I did have Genty as my contrarian play on my cheat sheet, so at least I have one feather in my cap, but it was a bad week. How you doing?
I'm doing well, but same thing, not a great week. I was way too invested in Caleb Williams and didn't play Genty after saying this is the week of the rookie running back. And I just played Scatterbo, Hampton, Travion Henderson, did not play Genty. Big mistake, huge. You needed Genty. So it wasn't a great week. We talk about short slates, a nice balanced slate this week. I was luckily able to cash in a Drake May Hunter Henry, 1 p.m. only. Thankfully, cashed in something because the rest of the week wasn't good. Really mad at myself for not playing Genty.
Mike, talk to me about this slate coming up here. We got 10 games. We got bye weeks in here. When you assessed this slate initially and when you ran your initial projections or whatever you do with your model, did it look like a slate where the market had corrected itself, a harder slate to build? Like, how did you assess it?
You know, honestly, I had to check and make sure it wasn't Thanksgiving because it kind of felt like one of those 4-game slates. I saw the Lions on the slate. I saw the Cowboys. You saw Washington there. It feels like such a small slate relative to what we've seen. And we get this reaction every year. By the time you get to week 5, you get those bye teams. But man, with the some of the games on the schedule and the byes and the teams on bye, to me it feels like basically a 5-game slate, not a full slate.
It's different. It does feel different. I mean, I'm saying different relative to the first 4 weeks. Of course, we've got another London game, so that's making one less game, and then 4 teams on a bye. You saw it on that graphic, courtesy of Matt, who was just crushing it behind the scenes here. All right, I do. Before we get to Cowboys Jets, that's the game we're going to kick off with. I do have to offer an apology to everybody except for Jaggernaut24, because when I set up the contest last week, I did it winner take all. That was obviously an accident. Instead of paying the top 15, which of course this week's contest is set the proper way, but Jaggernaut won all the money. So if you're listening, you have 14 people to Venmo. Oh, I'm kidding. You do not have to do that. That's your money. But my bad, everybody. The John A came in second place there. He's already won this contest in the first 4 weeks, so he almost won it again and got all the money. And then Sab 4687 was third, and I think Sab has done well in this contest before as well. But let's get into games. Don't forget, please register for that contest. Don't hold it against me that if you were in the top 15 and you weren't first place, you're probably feeling like, hey, I don't want to do the contest this week. Please do it. I won't make that mistake again. Okay, and by the way, that'll be in the YouTube and podcast description. Cowboys Jets. Let's get it started. Mike, I'm going to start with you here. 47.5 point total. Cowboys on the road, favored by 2.5. There is so much to like about this game. So I guess my initial question is, are you going to be heavily invested in this game? And if so, how so?
Yeah, heavily invested, starting with an absolute banger here. This is the one I want the most part of out of every game on the slate. I'm going to play Justin Fields and Breece Hall together. They're both too cheap individually, but the combination, it gives you so much.
He might have frozen. Meg.
Yeah. Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, why not? Why not? We'll see if we can get him back. Go ahead.
Sure, you got it. Like Mike said, let's start with fireworks here. What a game to start with. This is the game we want to target. Obviously, the worst defense to target with the Cowboys, obviously, and a very high-powered offense in the Cowboys. So that's like the perfect recipe. I did a tweet this earlier in the week. It feels like the Bengals last year. Bad defense, great offense. That's like a fantasy football recipe of success. So I absolutely love the Cowboys side, and the Jets defense has not been great. So I absolutely kind of love everything on the Cowboys side. I'll be playing a lot of Dak to Pickens and Ferguson. Ferguson has been getting a ton of targets. Pickens looks great operating as the wide receiver 1. You can, obviously play Javonte Williams too. I think he's going to be high owned. I'm seeing a little lower ownership on Dak Prescott for some reason, but and then on the Jets side, love that too. You're going up against the league's worst defense. Got to love Justin Fields. We saw what he did on the ground on Monday night. And like Mike said, you could stack him with Breece Hall. You could stack him with Garrett Wilson. You could stack him with Mason Taylor, who got more involved Monday night. lot of options to go. I'm just going to have probably different combinations in both 1 p.m. only and main with these different stacks in this game.
Yeah, Mike, Meg mentioned that Dak Prescott getting maybe a little lower ownership than she expected. That's got to be because, I mean, obviously there's other quarterbacks we can talk about, but I assume people are going to want to play Justin Fields with Garrett Wilson. Obviously, Breece Hall's in play. Is that the side that you're leaning on?
Yeah, leaning heavily on the Jets side, at least in terms of quarterback, right? So, like, I'm going to play, Justin Fields, but I'm going to have Pickens and Ferguson on the run back on the other side. Like, Pickens and Ferguson having big games is going to be a very strong correlation to Justin Fields, just having to potentially throw more or look to run more. I love the Jets side. So for me, a lot of my builds are going to be Justin Fields, Breece Hall, the 2 Cowboys players that I want. And like I said, heavy exposure in this game. There could be lineups that I have Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Justin Fields, Pickens, and Ferguson on the other side. Like that is a very likely scenario for me this week.
And Mike, that's what I was going to ask you, because I think for especially some maybe newer players, like it's a little unorthodox to be like, all right, Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. Oh, and I'm going to throw the running back in too. But for you, that makes sense, right? Because it does feel like we love these teams where the targets and the rushing attempts are so concentrated. And with Braylon Allen out, and by the way, Miles Sanders might be out as we see on this screen here. I think Miles Sanders is out, by the way. But anyway, the point is we're looking at these 3 guys having the ball in their hands in a major, like in an incredibly significant way.
Yeah, very significant way. I don't think Isaiah Davis eats into much here. The scenario that he does, it's Breece Hall just had 2 consecutive.
Might have frozen. Right, Meg?
Yes.
Oh, no, he's good. All right. Maybe not. No, you're good. Mike, you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
You're good.
It's a struggle here today, guys, and I apologize for that. But yes, I don't see Davis eating into Breece Hall really at all. The only scenario that happens to me is multiple big 20-plus yard plays in a row from Breece Hall that, causes him to have to take a break. So love the Jets offense here. Whoever wins this game will be the first team to, record a defensive stop, essentially.
Meg, I mean, we see the stat here. Both teams allowing 30-plus points per game this season. I know you're going to have a part of this in the 1 o'clock slate and in the entire main slate. What would be your favorite way to build? Would it be Justin Fields and one of Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson? Or would it be Dak Prescott and the 2 pass catches you mentioned with a run back or 2? Like, what's your favorite way to build this one?
Probably my favorite way to build, because Fields is going to be higher owned and Dak is looking a little contrarian as far as quarterbacks go, is the Dak stack, the big Dak Dallas stack, and running it back with 2 Jets. My big macro take, I know this is like a player takes game by game show, but my big like macro strategy this week is basically what Mike's saying: lean into the great game environments or high team totals. So I'm going to have kind of more team onslaughts, big game stacks this week than probably I have of all the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, 47.5 point total, certainly one of the higher ones. And again, when you get a 47.5 point total and you also get a concentration of targets or rush attempt shares, it accentuates it even more from a fantasy DFS standpoint. And that's what we have with both the Cowboys and the Jets. As to your point, Meg, when you talked about Ferguson and Pickens, like those are the guys getting targets, right? I mean, obviously Javonte Williams is in the conversation. Meg, before we leave this game, if you're talking about a contrarian piece relative to the rest of the pieces in this game, Javonte Williams is that guy, correct?
I'm kind of still seeing him getting ownership. So that's why I think, and again, check back on ownership, obviously Saturday to really see how pieces move. But that's kind of why I like the Dak Prescott stack. Is it's seeming like Dak is lower owned, Javonte's getting more of the ownership. So that's kind of how I'm handling that. I'll also just throw out that the only concern for me in this game is that the Jets run so much and could slow the game down. But I'm hoping with Justin Fields, with Breece Hall, with Garrett Wilson, that there will be enough explosive plays on both sides that the fantasy environment is still good, despite them, wanting to, run the ball.
All right. I think, Mike, any follow-up comments on this game before we move to Giants Saints?
No, other than don't be afraid to tight end it. Jake Ferguson, Mason Taylor, I can play both of those guys with one of the flex.
All right, let's go to Giants Saints. This is a lower total. I do think this is an interesting game because of how just the line movement. Saints favored by 1.5 points here, which is frankly a surprise to me. But coming off the way they played against the Bills, I kind of get it. 42.5 point total. We know Malik Neighbors is out for the season here, and Meg, that does. We look at Jackson Dart as 5,300. Now, concentration of targets probably go to Wan'Dale Robinson at 5,300. And of course, who am I forgetting? Darius Slayton.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, your guy, Cam Scatterby as well. Are you interested in this game, particularly on the Giants side?
On the Giants side, for me, it's not going to be like a Jackson Dart stack because, again, he's going to have to get there. There just wasn't enough passing volume. He would have to get there with like 2 rushing touchdowns. And so for me, it's not going to be with Dart. It would just be with pieces like Scatterbo and throwing in like a cheap receiver piece with Wan'Dale Robinson or Slayton. So it wouldn't be like it would probably be one or the other. But I'm definitely interested in all 3 of those Giants are in my player pool.
Mike, this is interesting to me. I look at the Saints side. I'm not particularly interested in like Juwan Johnson, 3,900. We've got to see how healthy that tight end room is getting. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, not really interested. Kamara ceding some work to Kendre Miller. But I look at the other side, and I see Darius Slayton at 4,300 and Jackson Dart coming off a reasonably decent game at 5,300. I do have some interest there. What about you?
I got a little interest in Dart. I think the rushing upside is going to be there for, a few weeks, really until he takes a few hits. I think he's going to continue to run a lot. I'm not sure where I want to go pass catcher wise with him. It might just be Jackson Dart and kind of move on and just bet on his rushing upside and potentially throwing. I like Olave on the other side though. 42 targets through 4 weeks. I think that at 5,200 in a game against a Giants team that, this is a rare time that the Saints are favored in the game. Whether you agree with it or not, they are. And that to me tells me we should be competitive and neutral. That's where I want to play Olave and just betting on the volume, right? At 5,200, I think Olave is a great play this week.
Meg, do you think you're actually going to get to Scatterby at 6K, knowing what running backs are on the slate? Because I know you were big on him last week. Are we getting to him this week?
Yeah, and I mean, the usage is there. Unfortunately, the receiving wasn't there because Dart just took off and ran so much. So that kind of, brought down Scatterby not getting, as many targets, but he still had massive usage, multiple goal line touches or touches inside the 5 where he could have gotten in. So yes, I am going to go back to him. I know I was just very bullish on him all basketball season, but I've been impressed. The eye test is there for me. I'm impressed what I'm seeing. And then just the usage is there and a good matchup against the Saints too. So I am going to go back to Scatterby here.
Are you any interest in Wan'Dale Robinson or Darius Slayton?
Yes, both are definitely in my pool. I wouldn't do like both together since I'm not playing Dart, obviously, but I would even do like a Scatterby and Slayton if I, needed salary with Slayton. But yeah, it's basically those 3 Giants in my player pool.
For some reason, I'm irrationally interested in Darius Slayton. I just think I don't think we listen. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is good, and I think he's going to get a lot of receptions, right, in the short area. Although we've seen him go deep a little bit more this year, but that's going to be super valuable from a DFS standpoint. But for some reason, I think Darius Slayton, they can run him all over the field, and I just think his upside against the Saints defense is pretty tremendous when you consider his price at 4,300. So I think that's going to be a play that I'm just going to go in on and just hope that I'm right, because I do think he has some game-breaking ability. Mike, am I crazy? Any thoughts there?
Too. Sorry.
You're not crazy at all. This is the point of the program where I usually tell you if I'm not playing him, I'll grab the anytime touchdown and have a little insurance. I'm not going to do the anytime touchdown with Slayton, but I am right now locking in his longest reception over 18.5. I think that number should be 21.5, 22.5. So I do like Slayton's big play, upside ability, over 18.5 longest reception.
I love when we get to talking some props or lines that we like in this show, because I just love the crossover. We're going to make an effort to do, and I need to do a better job doing that myself, getting into talking about what some of these props are and whether we like them or not as we go through the DFS slate, because again, I think it's so relevant. One is so relevant to the other. All right, we got to get to Dolphins Panthers, which is a very interesting DFS game. Texans Ravens, not quite as much. Raiders Colts. Am I going back in on Geno Smith? You're going to hate me because I just might do that. But we'll find out after this message from our partners.
Saturday kicks off at noon, and it's big time. First, Air Force and Navy face off in Annapolis. Then it's big time at the Rose Bowl when UCLA hosts Penn State.
We're back on Fantasy Football today, DFS. And Mike, I'm going to start with you here. Dolphins, Panthers. I believe we've got a 45.5 point total. Dolphins favored by 1.5. Of course, Tyreek Hill not playing in this game. Darren Waller is, though. 2 touchdowns last week. We got to keep an eye on Chuba Hubbard. Jatavian Sanders, I don't think is playing. So Tommy Tremble, 2,900 might be interesting to some people. Mike, it's the Dolphins side that I'm interested in here. A lot to choose from. Do you like this side of the ball?
I do. I like Devon Achane a lot here. Look, he didn't get there in terms of receiving last time, but it was because he was running the football. He ran the football 20 times in that game. Typically you'd see, 12, 13, and then, he's in the passing game, right? But that wasn't the script because they were leading a game for the first time in a long time, right? I think they're right back to a competitive game, one that they could be leading, could be trailing, but not expecting double-digit leads early. With Tyreek off the field, you could see 3rd and 7 way more often this week. And if that happens, that 3rd and 7 was built for Devon Achane, right? So I think he's going to be right back up there. He's my favorite play in this game by a considerable margin. Jalen Waddle is too cheap for the role without Tyreek Hill on the field. I'll play both of them. Not going to play anyone on the Carolina side.
Yeah, I think Ted McMillan would be a guy I would consider, Meg, but I don't know that I'm going to get there at 5,700. I completely agree about Achane. He's either my favorite or one of my favorites on this slate. I think he's going to get – the Dolphins have to win. It's going to go through Achane in the pass and the run. So I like him. I'm kind of neutral on Waddle. What do you like? Is it Achane and get out, or do you like others like Mike does?
I actually, just because of ownership, don't know that I'll get to the Dolphins much because there's another high-priced, chalky running back that I'm going to turn to, and I really don't see, as far as lineup construction, me being able to get to both. So it's going to be more stand of, I hope for, I obviously want you guys to do well too, but fading Achane and hoping like Ollie Gordon, to get some of the goal line touches or the high value touches near the goal line. And, he wasn't as involved in the passing game even after Tyreek Hill left. But like Mike said, they were working from a very positive game script. So I could be massively wrong on this, but I'm going to play it that way just because there's just other pieces on the slate that I want to get to more. But he's got a great matchup. And obviously we know he can be so explosive. So that could burn me big time. And again, there's other guys I like around Waddle's price too. So for me, I have Ted McMillan in my player pool. I have Tommy Tremble in my player pool, but I don't think I'm going to get to a lot here. And I know it's risky.
Can I ask you, the other running back that you like that's chalky and expensive probably, is it Jonathan Taylor?
Of course. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I'm building this lineup on the fly. That's why if you're watching, I'm kind of looking down. I'm looking down at my phone as we're going through these games, just in this moment to build a lineup. And I can get Achane and Jonathan Taylor in a lineup. And Jackson Dart's my quarterback. I just threw that in there because we just talked about Jackson Dart. I like his rushing equity. I just went with the Titans defense at 2,300. Taylor at tight end for the Jets. But you could throw Tremble. You could throw any cheap tight end in there. I still have 6,000 left, which, by the way, allows me in my flex position. I could play Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall at cheap. Obviously, Breece Hall is only, 5,600. So right. I'm just pointing out that I do think, and again, I'm not going to build this out. I do think there are ways. If I put Breece Hall in there, it still leaves me 6,200 with all 3 of my wide receiver spots open. So I'm just throwing it out there. Like there are ways to play them both. And I know you know that, but I hear you 100%. If you're choosing between the two, you want to play Jonathan Taylor against the Raiders at home, 100% get that.
I think it's the other piece, and we'll get to it later because it's on the 4:00 slate. But I feel like I'm going to be mandatory trying to get some piece of the Lions in because I just don't see how they have such a high total. We know that they can just absolutely blow the doors off of teams and blow teams out. So I just see me getting to some piece of the Lions, maybe even playing up for the Lions defense, which is not a thing I typically do at all. So I'll just say that too, that I absolutely love that kind of like breakdown and line of construction you just did. But I think in the back of my head, it's like Jonathan Taylor's mandatory, a piece of the Lions defense, or excuse me, a piece of the Lions are kind of mandatory for me. And that's why I'm struggling.
I do want to point out, I don't think Chuba Hubbard's going to miss this game. I mean, I know we have a lot of running backs that we know are going to miss, that are surprise to people, like Trey Benson. Bucky Irving doesn't look like he's going to play. Megan, correct me if I'm wrong there, but Chuba Hubbard, the news I'm hearing about him, and it's Thursday morning, I'm sure they're out at practice right now, he's probably fine in your eye, because if he's not, Rico Dowdle at 4,300.
Right.
I mean, it's like obvious, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of these backup running back situations that are, very cheap. It's just, I don't know that I'll get to him, because sometimes we have these backup running back situations like Jordan Mason a couple of weeks ago that was just like a print play. You play him, you take the chalk, you move on. Yeah. I don't feel like that as much this week. Again, from there's a lot of big like macro strategies in my head. And again, I know this is a game by game breakdown, but that's kind of all playing into kind of just the big macro strategy for me.
No, we want to hear about the macro strategy, if not more than the micro, frankly. Jalen Waddle, we mentioned. I'm not going to play Darren Waller at 3,500. Just not going to go there. If they were at home, maybe it'd be a different story. But Malik Washington's 3,900, a hot name in year-long fantasy circles. Would that be a guy you would potentially get to? I want to point out Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is on this roster as well. He's 3,400. But it'd probably be those three as far as the wide receivers are concerned. Your thoughts on Malik Washington?
Right. With Malik Washington, from what I'm hearing as far as usage, it seems like, and I'll just say NWI just for is going to play more of the snaps, is going to play in 2 wide receiver sets. So that Malik Washington will likely get less playing time, only playing in 3 wide receiver sets. So with that said, I don't have a ton of interest. And listen, NWI ran so pure on touchdowns last year. Maybe he does again, and you can play him. I don't know. I kind of put both of them in question mark, but I don't think I'm going to get there. I have Darren Waller in my pool because we know I love cheap tight ends, but I don't know that I'll get there either. I really don't know that I'll get too much on this game, but I will say, big disclaimer, makes me a little nervous.
NWI anytime touchdown. It's just like, just from last year. I know it's a completely different team and situation, but just feels like, I don't know what that number is. It's probably +3 something. I just feel like that might be something that actually hits. Okay, well, let's go to a game where we probably have less interest, and we'll try to get Mike back in here, obviously having some connection issues. But Meg, me and you for Texans Ravens, 40.5 point total here. Texans on the road, favored by 1.5. Well, that's because it doesn't appear that Lamar Jackson is going to play. We've got Cooper Rush at 4,300. I'll tell you, normally, Meg, I would be like, oh, this is interesting, like almost flat min for a quarterback. But against the Texans defense, not super interested there. Not really interested in Derrick Henry. Zay Flowers is 6,200. And then the Texans side, I did mention, I had a bad week last week, but I did mention Woody Marks at 4,400. Like, hey, that would be, I think the words I used was if you wanted to get cute in a bigger contest, Woody Marks is your guy. I didn't play him. I'm just telling you. But listen, I'm trying to give advice here. I'm not going to play every play that I like, but hopefully some people ended up playing him. Do you like either side of the ball here, Meg?
This is really tough. And as the week goes on and I do more research, it's almost like I'm trying to talk myself into certain spots here. I don't love a lot in this game. I'm just not impressed with the Texans offense overall, as a big picture. Woody Marks, looking at him from a prospect, I know my brother who does a lot of scouting type stuff just thought he lacked vision, was more like the explosive back. He absolutely hit last week. He only had I believe 56% of the snaps. So I'm just worried about if he becomes chalky. And again, by the way, he was another rookie running back you definitely wanted to play. And you were so right on that call last week. I just don't know if I'm going to go back there, even though I know a lot of people might. If Lamar is out, and that looks like Lamar Jackson will be out, it's so hard to get behind Derrick Henry. But then again, he's always kind of run well against the Texans. He's been like a Texans killer, going back to his Titans days. And then last year, I remember I had him in the best ball playoffs, and he absolutely destroyed the Texans on Christmas Day. So I'm starting to talk myself into would a Derrick Henry, Nico Collins, just skinny stack of this game be kind of interesting? That's where I'm landing on a Thursday morning.
I think so. I don't love that skinny stack.
Yeah.
But I do think, and it's only because I just don't want to play Nico Collins, but like, what am I talking about, right? This Ravens defense is like trash right now. So it's not that I don't get what you're saying. I will say this, though. I think Derrick Henry is like the ultimate. I'm not looking at ownership in this moment. I think it's the ultimate contrarian play. Because they're at home. Their backs are against the wall. Nobody thinks they're any good. Everybody basically thinks the Ravens season is over. I mean, they're not explicitly saying that, but the sentiment around the Ravens is like, oh, they are in big, big trouble. And I get that. But Derrick Henry is still Derrick Henry, or at least I think he is. And if he starts running downhill and this Texans defense isn't what we think it is, again, this is DFS. We're not necessarily playing likely outcomes as much as we're playing ceiling outcomes. I think Derrick Henry at 7K is just really interesting because it wouldn't shock me if he has 2 touchdowns and 120 yards. And all of a sudden the Ravens are like, we're still the Ravens.
Exactly. That has to be like, obviously what the Ravens are going to need to go try to make happen. And you'd think they would. Again, it might not work because especially without Lamar Jackson, but again, with the low ownership and honestly, running backs so far have been able to run decently on the Texans. It's not like there's some scary run defense that you don't want to touch, like the Browns. That's one I'm like staying away from, running backs against the Browns. I don't feel that way about the Texans. I'm scared about staying away from matchups against Derek Stingley and the pass defense. So I actually think that could be an interesting contrarian play. It was a play that like on Monday and Tuesday wouldn't have even considered it. But as the week goes on and I think about it more, I'm getting a little more interested from a contrarian standpoint.
It's either going to fall flat or it's going to, this is a ceiling outcome we're looking for, but the floor I actually think is pretty darn low for Derrick Henry in this particular situation. Speaking of floors, Geno Smith hit the floor, or at least hit the fantasy floor last week. Let's go to Raiders and the Colts. This game is very interesting. We talked about the high total earlier in the show, and this is another one of those high totals, 47.5. Geno Smith is 5,400. Daniel Jones is 5,800. Meg, I like this game in all kinds of ways. Start us off with Jonathan Taylor. You're playing him.
Absolutely. Going to be chalk, but I'll just preview, our cheat sheet. He's going to be my chalk buy. Absolutely love him. His usage is amazing. We have a good matchup here at home. I absolutely love Jonathan Taylor this week. And yeah, like you said, I'm interested in a lot of pieces of this game, actually more on the Colts side, but Jonathan Taylor is the one that's like a priority spend and a chalk buy for me.
They've got an over 27 point implied total due the Colts. So you can get aggressive on this side as well. Any thoughts on playing Daniel Jones and like a Michael Pittman? Alec Pierce appears to be getting healthier. I think he's playing. So guys like Adonai Mitchell, who kind of screwed up a couple of times last week. I'm not sure about this receiver group because they're all healthy, Meg, that it makes me not want to play any of these guys. And obviously people are going to want to play Jonathan Taylor. But the reason I'm even bringing it up is if everybody wants to play Jonathan Taylor, then maybe Daniel Jones could be a nice contrarian play. Are you even thinking about D Jones in terms of stacking him or just playing him in general?
Yes, that's kind of going to be a hedge for me. Maybe it's going to be in 1 p.m. only, but like I'll do a hedge lineup where I do like Daniel Jones, Michael Pittman Jr. I do think if it's one of the receivers, I agree with them being all healthy. That kind of makes it less interesting. But a Daniel Jones, Michael Pittman, and Tyler Warren stack is what I'm looking at from kind of like flipping it from the Jonathan Taylor. So I could see me doing a 1 p.m. only lineup, doing that Colts passing stack and being one of the few times I don't play Jonathan Taylor.
On the other side of the ball, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull the trigger again. Listen, I liked it last week. Granted, that was against the Bears and that was the Raiders at home. But I do think the Colts defense can be beat on the back end. And I like the conditions in a dome on a quote fast track. So I do think Geno Smith, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, not so much Brock Bowers, to be honest. I just don't know that he's shaken off that knee injury. He looks kind of slow. I think Michael Mayer is playing in this game, so he's going to get some targets. But I think a Geno Jacoby stack is in order. Both of those guys like kind of falling flat. But I think in this game environment, they could step up. I'm not going to Ashton Genty. Last week it was a contrarian play for me at 6,700. I'm just going to find value in other places. Do you like anybody on the Raiders side?
I totally get the Geno Smith stack or double stack, and I'm definitely not playing Brock Bowers either. but I don't think I'll get there. My quarterback pool is just kind of narrow this week.
Yeah.
But I do get the angle of that. I actually do still have Genty in my player pool. I am concerned about Colton Miller, the offensive lineman, being out. That's a big concern for me. But I'm willing to go back to the well here. It's not like the Colts are like a super scary matchup for Genty. So I just think they're just going to have to lean into him. So just like they did last week. So I do have Genty in my player pool.
Colts 6.5-point favorites. I don't know. It might be 7 in some places too. I do think this is a pretty good teaser leg or money line parlay leg. I know that's like a really it's not exactly a veteran move to recommend that, but I do think Colts money line, if you want to pair that with one or two other things, maybe you want to pair it with a Jonathan Taylor alt rushing yards line, because obviously his rushing yards line pretty high, but if you want to like take it down like 20 yards and you parlay that together with a money line play and maybe something else, then now all of a sudden you're talking about plus money. So something to think about there. I will play Trey Tucker again. It's not going to be like in my primary lineup, but you mentioned double stacks, Geno, Jacoby, Trey. I still think that's in play. I think Trey can get behind the defense. So I'm not going to bail on that quite yet. Broncos, Eagles, I'm probably bailing on, Meg. And by the way, we're working to get Mike back. But if we don't get Mike back, we still have his top 3 at each position. So I will be giving those out in just a few minutes. Meg, 43.5-point total. We've got the Eagles at home favored by 3.5 points here. I don't really have an argument to make for anybody. I think you could play Bo Nix potentially because he's only 5,700. I'm not interested in J.K. Dobbins here. I think he's been great, but against the Eagles on the road with the R.J. Harvey splits, not super interested. The pass catchers, not interested. I think if anything, you want to get contrarian on the Eagles side, but I'm out on this game.
You summed it up perfectly. This feels like a fun, and I said it a couple times last week. Sometimes I was right. Sometimes I was wrong. It feels like a fun real life game, interesting real life game, but not one I really want to target fantasy wise. Yeah.
And this Denver defense, I'm not exactly sure how good they are because I thought they'd be a little bit better, but I think they're good enough. And for me to be like, I'd rather take a chance somewhere else, go ahead.
And just the offensive coordinator, Kevin, I believe Patullo is his name for the Eagles, has not been impressive so far. Just, and who cares for Eagles fans? You're 4-0. It's fine. But like from a fantasy, I want to invest money on the offense, either in the betting market or in DFS. I just don't feel comfortable with it. And it, like you said, the Broncos defense feels, maybe it's not as elite as we thought, but it feels good enough that I'm just not interested on either side here.
If you were going to get cute in this game, I wouldn't do it with the passing game. I would just say Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the league, or at least the top 3 running back in the league. 7,500. People aren't going to be interested in playing him. Throw him out there. Forget about the Derrick Henry argument. Throw Saquon Barkley in one of those lineups where you're just trying to be super, super different. But yeah, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this game. I'm completely out on it. Bucs and the Seahawks is coming up next, and the rest of the 4:00 slate. We have 4 games. We know we love our 4:00 slates. We like our 1:00 slates. We like our main slates. We'll cover them all right after this message from our partners.
You can't count on accurate expiration dates.
No, that is a rookie mistake.
Or the kindness of strangers. But thanks to CBS Sports, you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount+.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. If you're watching us on the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel, A, thank you. B, make sure you download the Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast on Spotify or on Apple. And if you like this show, please take the time. We've got a lot of fans that have been watching this show for years. If you're one of them and you haven't taken the time to write a review for this show, we would really appreciate it. So just scroll down to wherever you're watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, hit 5 stars, mention a few great things about Meg, about Mike, and maybe even myself, or frankly, Matt, who is just producing an all-timer show. Let's get to one of Matt's graphics. Let's go to Tampa and Seattle. Seattle favored by 3.5 now. It was 3. Boy, did I like this line at 3. I might just I'm sure there's still 3s out there. I think the Buccaneers, with their injuries, Meg, are in for a tough game on the road against a very solid Seattle defense specifically. I'm not sure about this team overall, but I really respect this defense. I like them at home in this particular spot with an East Coast team coming to their house. That's the betting angle. How do you like the DFS angle in this one? Because I think there's a couple of plays worthy of consideration.
Sure, absolutely. But I'll start with, I have the Seattle defense in my player pool because I think that is interesting. They're reasonably priced. I don't think they're going to be super chalky, and they've been so impressive. I'm very impressed with them so far this season. So I like that. Obviously, JSN, it was weird on that Thursday night game last week, didn't get a ton of targets, didn't really get involved to the second half, but I'm willing to go back to him at 7,100 here. Just the volume he gets. I do have Mbuka and Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin actually got, for his first game back, more involved than I thought he would. I don't know that, again, because of how much I respect the Seattle defense, I'll get to them much. The big talking point, of course, is Bucky Irving likely out. Rashad White is in my player pool, but we kind of talked about it. It doesn't feel like any of these backup running backs, for me, maybe for others it's different, feel like a must play like Jordan Mason felt like a couple weeks ago. So he's in my pool, obviously. And the great thing about Rashad White is he could be very active in the passing game. We're playing on a full point PPR site of DraftKings. That is interesting. Maybe I hedge and play him a little bit, on short slate, but I don't know that I'm going to get to him a ton, but I do think he's worthy of being in the player pool.
You said a couple of things that I really liked. First of all, you mentioned the short slate. You mentioned the 4:00 slate, because we just talked about so many running backs that we like that are like have a ton of value, like Breece Hall, that lineup I built, right? Achane, Jonathan Taylor. You can build those lineups with all those guys together. We mentioned other running backs as well. I might have Rashad White in some of those lineups, and it'll free up a lot of cash if I'm like not playing Jonathan Taylor or Achane, for example. But in the 4:00 only slate, I actually love Rashad White.
Same.
Because first of all, when he's come in for Bucky Irving so far this season, and I know Sean Tucker's going to get some carries, but when he's come in, Rashad White has looked very fresh. He looks like a guy that's like, hey, remember me? Like, I'm still good at running the ball too. But to your point earlier, he's a pass catcher. Sean Tucker's not taking that role from him. And I actually think this is going to be a very negative game. I'm overstating it for a reason, because I actually think the Seahawks are going to cover. But I think Rashad White is going to be very active in the running and the receiving game. And again, in a full point PPR, even in FanDuel, I think it makes a little bit of sense. Half point, that's not nothing. But in a full point PPR league, I mean, I'm going to look at Rashad White's receptions over, and I understand that's somewhat game script dependent. But especially in DFS, I'm willing to count on that to some degree. So Rashad White at 4,700, I think in the 4:00 slate he's practically a lock button for me, because it just allows me to do a lot of things at a lot of different positions. Outside of that, Meg, Mbuka at 6,900, it's a no for me. It's a flat no. I'm not even considering it. Chris Godwin at 5,900 is interesting, but there's so many receivers in that 5,500 to 6K range that I just don't feel the need to do it. And then going to JSN, I think that's just too expensive for me. And I don't think this is the game script where I think it's going to be similar to the Arizona game, where they're just not targeting him a ton. They just don't really need to. I could be wrong. He could get all of that early. And maybe this game's a lot closer than I think, but I'm going to be out on a 7,100 JSN. Are you even considering Kenneth Walker or even Charbonnet at 63 and 5,300?
When they're both active and playing, I don't like them as much. Obviously, when one's out, then I absolutely love them, and I'm even willing to play them chalky. And again, by the way, 2 weeks ago when Jordan Mason was good chalk, so was Kenneth Walker, because Charbonnet was out. So if one of them's out, I'm very interested. When both of them are there, I don't really have as much interest in the Seattle running back. So yeah, I think you make a good point. JSN is in my player pool. I think you make a great point about him. That could be another point to just fade as at that high of a price. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to get to the Bucs pass catchers much, but I do like in the short slate, Rashad White, as you mentioned, and Seattle defense. Because again, you don't have to have any kind of anti-correlation fear there.
Right. If anything, if we're right about Rashad White receptions, it's probably because the Seattle defense did a really good job in making it a negative game script for Tampa. Exactly. Speaking of all things negative, let's go to the Titans. Boy, did I have some Titans fans mad at me when I said take the under and take their alt under on losses. Now, I'm not right yet, but it looks like the Titans are the team I thought they were going to be. Titans at the Cardinals. A lot of issues here, especially Meg. And by the way, 42.5 point total. Cardinals favored by 7.5 points. The news that broke yesterday, Meg, which disappointed me because all my big money leagues, I have Trey Benson. He was just going to be a guy I was going to draft in every league as a backup, handcuff type situation. And now I don't get to play him because he's on IR. He's probably going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. I don't know if you have a take on whether you'd rather play Michael Carter or Amari DiMercado or obviously probably not Zonovan Knight, but any thoughts on that backfield? Because that backfield opens things up if we know who the guy's going to be against the Tennessee defense. My take here is it might be enough of a rotation where you're not getting what you think you're getting here. Your thoughts?
Same. And by the way, I have to go back to the Benson receptions receiving line. I had that last Thursday, and I did not understand why he wasn't in there at the end. Yeah. Well, it turns out there was a reason. It wasn't just to play DeMarcado. He was hurt. So as far as that is a bummer. It sounds like that Michael Carter would be the one you'd want to target here, that he would be the starter. But and it sounds like DeMarcado could get more of like the pass catching role, but are they really going to need that in this game? And because I agree with you on the sentiment of the Titans and how disappointing they've been this season. So I really don't see me getting too much here. I know you could consider Michael Carter at this price. There are too many other running backs that I like a lot more, and that's not where I'm looking to save salary here.
I think you could take the shot, but I also think we need a little bit more clarification on that particular, and we might not get it, but we need a little bit more clarification. If Gannon comes out and he says DeMarcado's role does not change, he is the pass catching running back, then okay, maybe Michael Carter. But again, Michael Carter is the 3rd/4th string for a reason, right? We've lost James Conner, we've lost Trey Benson. So we don't know how much of a gap there is from Michael Carter to DeMarcado to even Zonovan Knight. So I just think that's worthy of pointing out. But at a flat 4K, if we get clarification, again, it's also in the 4:00 slate, he does make sense, but also on the main slate. Marvin Harrison, I think, is an interesting contrarian play. I think he has the ability, even on limited targets, to blow up and have a great game. We saw a little bit of that last week. Any thoughts on the Titans side before we move on? Because Io Manor is only 4,100. I mean, I guess that makes sense in a negative game script. Like, I've been out on Calvin Ridley all season, and that seems to be paying off as well. But Io Manor would be the one pass catcher where you're like, all right, at 4,100, I mean, this guy has at least some upside.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you can go there. I don't think I personally will. We talked about Darius Slayton. I'd probably go more in that direction. So yeah, I really don't think I'm going to get to much in this game, actually, and maybe not even on the 4:00 slate, because again, I know we're talking game by game, but as like a big picture macro strategy perspective, my biggest leans this week are lean into like big onslaughts of team onslaughts and big like game stacks. And so that's going to then lead to just totally fading games like the Eagles game, like this game.
We've got 2 more games in the 4:00 slate before our cheat sheet and our top 3. And these are 2 of the games that you're probably talking about, right? Because this is this Commanders game at the Chargers, 47.5 point total. That's now our 3rd 47.5 point total. And the next game, by the way, is even bigger than that. Lions at the Bengals, 49.5 point total there, I believe. Chargers favored by 2.5. Jaden Daniels is going to play in this game. He's a flat 7K. Running back situation for Washington is kind of a mess in terms of, rushing attempt share and things of that nature. Terry McLaurin, I don't think, is playing in this game, Meg. You can shed some light on that. Deebo Samuel at 6,300. The other side, I think people are really interested in. Omarion Hampton, he's been priced up a little bit, 6,500. Justin Herbert's only 6,100, and his pass catchers, QJ, 5,700, Ladd McConkey, 5,500, and Keenan Allen starting to get priced up a little bit at 5,600. I do want to mention Oronde Gadsden's 2,700. Meg, there's a lot of fruit, particularly on the Chargers side. How do you play this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's 2025 and QJ is priced higher than Ladd McConkey. I didn't think it's week 5. I just
skipped right over that. I just glossed over that like it's normal. That's how weird it is with the Chargers right now.
So weird, but it's valid, right? I mean, he's been the wide receiver one so far. I do feel like at any given week, we've seen Keenan Allen spike. We're going to see Ladd McConkey spikes. I still believe that. Is it this week? It could be. So the way I'm playing this is I'm going to play Justin Herbert. And granted, again, just like playing Genty and I'm nervous about Colton Miller being out, I'm very nervous about Joe Alt being out. And now a second tackle. So obviously the offensive line concerns for the Chargers are real. I am a little nervous about that, but we have seen Herbert be willing to take off and use his legs. So that is why I am still interested in Justin Herbert's stacks. I do think that the Washington run defense has gotten better. I have Hampton in my player pool. Don't know how much I'll get to him, but I do have him in my player pool. Maybe that's more of a 4:00 only play, but I do like Herbert stacks, and I'm just willing to kind of rotate through them if I play him a couple times. I likely would have him with a double stack of some kind, because I do think one or two receivers, and you can include Gadsden in there, are going to get there against the Washington pass defense.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I wonder, is this a situation too where, especially on the main slate, we want to consider Justin Herbert naked, Meg, because we can't decide among the pass catchers? Is that at least a possibility for you?
That is a possibility, because I said part of the appeal of Herbert, even with a banged up offensive line, is maybe he takes off and runs for 40 yards. Who knows? Maybe he scrambles in the end zone. So yeah, and maybe it is just more of an even distribution, right? And then if it's that, then you could do that. So yes, I'd be fine with that, but I likely will stack him with at least one.
Is Ladd McConkey potentially one of them? I have to ask, because he's the cheapest of the three wide receivers, but it's hard to justify.
It is. But if you say, you need to just tell me who's going to score the most, based on the past 4 games, I'd say QJ. Based on last season, I'd say Ladd McConkey. Based on history, I'd say Keenan Allen. So that's my way of saying, I don't know. Week to week, I really think we will see different spike weeks. So I have absolutely no idea who is the wide receiver to play here. Right now, it's kind of looking like Ladd still has ownership. They all kind of have a little ownership, but nobody's crazy chalky. Nobody's crazy contrarian. So probably because people are thinking what I'm thinking, just kind of rotate through them. I have no idea who's going to be the one you absolutely need this week.
Is your favorite of the 3 receivers Quentin Johnston, though, in terms of DFS for this week?
Yeah. Yes, I think that does make sense. But for some reason, I guess in my head, I feel like I want to be there for the Ladd McConkey breakout, though he doesn't get red zone targets. So, but on a site like DraftKings, if he doesn't drop, they opened up and he had like a big drop to start the game. So if he starts hot and maybe Herbert's peppering quick passes with the offensive line issues, then I can talk myself into that. So for some reason, I still just want to be early to Ladd McConkey breaking out. And I'm convinced it will happen at some week soon.
Meg, I assume you don't want to be early on getting on to Jaden Daniels post-injury, at least not this week. Are we out on him at 7K? And are we considering a guy like Deebo Samuel at 6,300? Because for me, I'm out on both of those, which is interesting, right? Because I want to stack one side of this game potentially, but I don't know that I want to. This is one of those situations where I'm not sure I really want to have a run back.
Right. And I said that too, that like there's some games that I want to stack up, like the Jets, Cowboys, or the Raiders, Colts. And then there's other games like this one and another game we're going to talk about where I just want one side. And definitely not Jaden Daniels coming back from injury, because obviously I don't see the rushing getting there. And that's what helps the upside. And then Deebo, I do have him written down in my pool, but I just don't know that I'll get there much, maybe in the 4 p.m. only.
We've got one more game to get to before our cheat sheets and our top 3 at each position. But I will tell you, I cheated and I went to Mike's top 3 at each position. So Justin Herbert is his number 2. There's 3 quarterbacks, obviously, in his top 3 for each position. Justin Herbert is number 2. So he likes the Justin Herbert. And I'm sure, knowing Mike, he really likes Keenan Allen. So obviously, some sort of mixture of those receivers with Justin Herbert, I think, is probably in play for Mike as well. Let's go to the Lions and the Bengals, 49.5 point total. The Lions implied total, Meg, 30. So I'm assuming, based on what you said earlier in the show, you want pieces of this game. The question is, speaking of the portfolio being somewhat diversified in Detroit, you got Gibbs, you got Montgomery, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta. It's possible Khalif Raymond or Tesla could get involved here. So how do you play this Detroit side?
I'm not a sim builder. I hand build lineups, but if I was a sim builder and putting rules in, I'd say min 1 Detroit Lions player or defense. I just feel like you said the 30 point total hit the over. I don't see how they don't score less than 35 this week. The Bengals look bad, and we know Detroit's not a team that's just fine, milking the clock and running it out. They will just put up points on you. We've seen that time and time again. So I just really feel like you're going to need a piece of the Lions in this slate, and that's how I'm going to play it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But yeah, I think it's min 1 Lions, and you can include the Lions defense in there, and I'm going to rotate through. I'm really open to all the pieces. When you say, who do you like in Detroit? All of them is probably my answer. The most, probably Amon-Ra St. Brown, even though he's expensive. But I do the most contrarian. I feel like Montgomery's getting a little less usage than last year, but we saw it 2 weeks ago. It's not like he's only getting 30% of the touches. He's still getting enough to where he could have a 2-touchdown game. And especially in a game where, why would you run Gibbs into the ground in this game when they're likely going to be playing from way ahead? Just like the Ravens game a couple of weeks ago, I think Montgomery could be a very contrarian play on a team total that's so high.
And in a game where you've got a 10.5-point spread, it just makes sense to have David Montgomery play a lot more in terms of just getting just a higher snap share, particularly in the second half. He's only 5,200. Like, I don't want to play Gibbs personally at 7,700. But David Montgomery at 5,200 certainly has my interest. On the other side, though, Meg, I mean, listen, it's a 20-point implied total. They're going to be playing catch-up. They're at home, so it might look a little bit. But by the way, Jake Browning, I think, is a fine quarterback. His matchups have been so brutal. We're just, unfortunately, we don't want to apply context, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks, because they either suck or they're awesome. There's like no in between, and there's no context applied. I think Jake Browning is fine. But another tough matchup, but he's at home. Jamar Chase, I don't think we're playing at 7,800. T. Higgins, the upside seems a little limited with him at 5,900. Are we considering anybody on that side? Because, again, this is a game where you could just play some Lions and no runbacks.
This is going to, for me personally, it's going to be a Lions, min one Lions, and no runbacks. I did a prop or a Bengals prop last week and had kind of a sweat on a parlay I had built. And then afterwards I said, write down like Bart Simpson on a chalkboard. I'm not going to play, especially in bad matchups, a backup, pass catchers with a backup quarterback. And it just, like you said, there needs to be context with Browning, but these matchups have been tough. But I don't know that this week is that much better. I don't know. I can't get there. And I know they're playing in a negative game script. Maybe one of the pass catchers does get there, but I'm not going to go to the Bengals at all.
Yeah, I'm actually looking up because I'm very curious to see what Jamar Chase's receiving yards prop is, because, normally he's at, somewhere in the top 3, and I'm still scrolling. It's 64.5. And just to give you an idea of, how far below that is some of because again, he's expensive, right? What are we seeing? 7,800 for Jamar Chase.
They weren't able to bump it down because it was a Monday night game,
That's a good point. George Pickens, his receiving yards prop is in that 69, 68, 71.5, depending on where you look. And obviously he's a lot less expensive. JSN, to your point, 81.5. That's top 2. So, you were talking about playing JSN. You were talking about Sims and optimizers. Optimizers probably going to like JSN a little bit with a receiving yards prop at 81.5. Puka Nacua tonight, 95.5, which is absolutely crazy. But just so everybody knows, that at least on this slate, that the top guys from a receiving, I'm just talking receiving yards because we were talking about Jamar Chase, JSN, George Pickens, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, who you did talk about in that stack you were talking about, Jalen Waddle, and then it gets to Jamar Chase. And then right under Jamar is Garrett Wilson, just so everybody knows. So I'll try to put some of that, more of that info out as these shows go along, especially when it comes to the running backs and rushing and receiving. I think people are always interested in those projections. Christian McCaffrey tonight, Thursday Night Football, 117. But in terms of on this slate, just so everybody knows, before we get to our cheat sheets and top 3, Jonathan Taylor, rushing and receiving, 112.5. Next is Devon Achane at 109.5. So when I was jamming those two into a lineup, an expensive one, but we saw a very, very doable one. I've got the top 2 guys on the slate, rushing and receiving. So again, they're probably going to be chalky for a reason. So I'm not saying I'm so smart for playing those 2, but just that rushing and receiving line, the receptions, the PPR you're going to get from that. Right below them, only a couple yards below them, is Jahmyr Gibbs. And then we see Saquon Barkley at 102.5. Let's see, Breece Hall at 95.5. And Omarion Hampton right below there. He's actually tied with Breece Hall. And Javonte Williams just under that. So those are your top 7 or 8 rushing and receiving at the running back position. All right, let's get to our cheat sheet. Because, Meg, when we get to stack, chalk buy, chalk fade, contrarian value, I just mentioned Javonte Williams. You're going to that game, but you're going to the pass catchers and the quarterback. That's your favorite stack.
Right. So I'm seeing lower ownership on Dak Prescott. We'll see what it is Sunday morning, but that's how I'm going to play it, in that I like that game environment so much. So my favorite stack is Dak Prescott, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson. My chalk buy is Jonathan Taylor. Talked about all the reasons why and love that game. I never want to be like on the other side of you and Mike, but I am going to fade Devon Achane at high ownership just because, again, there's so many game environments and team onslaughts that I like a little bit more. My contrarian play, speaking of teams that I just want to have a lot of, is the Lions, and contrarian play is David Montgomery, looking to come in at low owned and one of the lowest owned Lions pieces. And then my value, I put Mason Taylor and cheap tight ends. I know that's kind of my thing every week, but I do see the value there, especially in that game environment for Mason Taylor.
All right. I've kind of mixed up my contrarian and value plays. Not that it's wrong necessarily, but they're both kind of value plays. But I'll start with my stack. Geno Smith and Jacoby Myers. Yes, I'm going to do it again in a negative game script. I agree with the sentiment that Geno Smith is not a very good quarterback, but I do think there's a bounce back in order at some point for Geno Smith. I think they'll be playing catch up. And I think at 5,400, he could pay off his price tag, especially if he connects with Jacoby for a couple of there. Again, I think Trey Tucker's in play there. I don't think that should be everybody else's favorite stack. I'm going to be playing other stacks, including the Dak one, including Justin Fields and some of the other ones we talked about. But I'm definitely going to have this stack in a couple of lineups. Chalk by Breece Hall, 5,600. I mean, this guy without Braylon Allen, he's going to get so much work. Cowboys better against the run than they are against the pass, but I don't think that's really going to matter too much. And I think Breece Hall is going to catch his fair share of receptions as well. My chalk fade is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Not incredibly chalky, but chalky enough for me to fade it. Don't like the price. I like the contrarian play of David Montgomery, frankly. My contrarian play, this was originally Marvin Harrison, but I changed it to Darius Slayton, and I got to double check his ownership. But I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Slayton. And I certainly think he's a value play at 4,300 in a game that I think could surprise us from a Giant standpoint. I think Jackson Dart, Darius Slayton stack, Wan'Dale Robinson in play there as well. Value play, I like Rachaad White at 4,700. Maybe we're waiting for more news on that, but I do think Rachaad White's going to get a lot of carries and he's going to get a lot of receptions in a likely negative game script for Tampa on the road against Seattle. All right, let's get to Mike's top three at each position. We probably have a graphic for this, so let's put that up if we have it, Matt. But if not, that's totally okay too. Oh, here we go. Quarterback, Justin Fields. No surprise there. Justin Herbert and Jackson Dart. We talked about all, and Mike had a chance to talk about both Justin Fields and Jackson Dart on the show. He also likes Justin Herbert. Running back, he told you he likes Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, and Breece Hall. No surprise there. And for those of you asking for cash considerations, I can tell you without having to ask Mike that Justin Fields in particular, Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, he would say all of those are great cash game plays. Jackson Smith and Jigbo, we gave a lot of conversation about him. We like his combo props really high. So that's his favorite wide receiver. So he agrees with you there, Meg. Jalen Waddle, probably a good cash game play for Jalen, although I could be wrong about that. George Pickens, a better cash game play, in my opinion. Those are his top three receivers. Tight end, Jake Ferguson, Tyler Warren, Zach Ertz. Again, I would consider a lot of these as cash game plays, but for those that are really trying to dial into that, I think Justin Fields, all three of these running backs, probably George Pickens, probably Jake Ferguson, all cash game considerations. Meg, anybody that pops out from a cash game standpoint here, or anybody that's not on this chart that you're like, I'm jamming him in for cash?
No, I think that that was a great point about it, who you would play for cash in that, and I totally agree.
All right. That's pretty much going to wrap it up, Meg. We've got a game tonight. I mentioned Christian McCaffrey's rushing and receiving line. The Niners, what is it, 8.5 now? I mean, yeah, it's 8.5. Thank you, Matt. And it's a 43.5 point total. I have a prop that is going to sound really speculative. I gave it out on the early edge this morning. I put it out on Sportsline as an official play. I have Demarcus Robinson over 28.5 receiving yards because he's one of two starting receivers. Mm-hmm. And they went out and got him in the offseason. And what I mean by that is they actually paid him some money. $6 million guaranteed, 2-year deal, $8 million. I do think that's kind of telling when you look at the rest of the healthy receivers on this roster, like Sky Moore, MVS on 1-year deals. They're kind of like nothing burgers. Kendrick Bourne also on a 1-year deal, getting paid like a couple $1 million. I'm not just relegating this to a money conversation, but Demarcus Robinson's been a guy that's been good, that Kyle Shanahan's praised in the past. He's going to be on the field in a negative game script as a starting receiver. Any thoughts on this game in general, though?
Well, first of all, when you said Demarcus Robinson, I was like, please stay over, because that's what I have. I
Love
have
it.
I have Demarcus Robinson, and I also like his longest reception too. So I think that is very interesting. This is so weird that Christian McCaffrey, when all the fears all off season, is the one 49er healthy, but he has the second most targets and the third most receptions this year. I think he would be wide receiver 7 or 8 right now if he's basically the wide receiver. And so I find that so interesting. I'm actually interested in alting his receiving tonight. They've had to. I mean, he hasn't been lower than, I believe, 54 yards, and he has been in the 70, 80, 90 yard range. I just feel like they're going to have to do that tonight too. And I don't think you can game script, as far as coverage that to take him out of the game or anything. So the Christian McCaffrey wide receiver thing. Week 5, we have Quentin Johnson, higher price than Ladd McConkey. We have Christian McCaffrey operating as a receiver. Wild stuff for week 5.
You mentioned McCaffrey's receptions and targets. The leader, of course, in receptions and targets, and I believe receiving yards, is on the other side of the ball, right? Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a concentration of targets, which is what we're looking for. And that's what we talked about at the beginning of the show with like Garrett Wilson, for example, with the Jets, and probably with George Pickens now with CeeDee Lamb being out for a few more weeks and Jake Ferguson. We're always looking for that. Puka Nacua probably going to have another big game as well. Do you have a take on who's going to cover the spread in this one?
I actually feel like 49ers are frisky enough that they could find a way, but I don't, honestly, because this is so weird with them being so depleted on offense. And of course, obviously Purdy out and Mac Jones playing too. So I don't know. I feel like they're frisky enough that I'm not interested in the Rams side of the spread, but I really don't. This game is tough tonight.
I agree with you. I'm a stay away on this one. If I had to take something, I would just say it's a division game. I respect Kyle Shanahan. I'll take the 8.5. The problem is we're so busy mentioning the offensive issues. We're not even talking about that Nick Bosa is not playing for the rest of the season. This defense looks pretty bad against Jacksonville. I think Blake Corum and, of course, Kyron Williams are going to have easy time of it at home. So I'm not touching this one. Other than props, I do like Mac Jones a little bit. I like Kendrick Bourne and Demarcus Robinson props as well. But all right, that'll do it. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining. Sorry Mike couldn't join the last 2/3 of the show, but we got his top 3 at each position. He'll be with us next week for the full show, having some connection issues in St. Louis at the moment. But Meg, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to a bounce back. I had a good first 3 weeks. It wasn't outstanding, but I've been profitable. I think either all 3 weeks or 2 out of the 3 weeks. Last week, I fell flat on my face. Everybody, please join the Fantasy Football Today DFS contest. Meg, we need you to give us the last word here, some vibes so I can bounce back from my week 4.
I say we just go in on these big game stacks and teams that we love. See how we're going to bounce back, hit our short slates, and we're going to find some winners this week.
I love that hit our short slates part. All right, that'll do it. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Meg. This has been Fantasy Football Today, DFS.